I was sent with other magic students to the demon realm to reinforce the magical barriers between the realms. When we arrived at the location, everyone felt so much fear that they fled and abandoned the mission. I was the only one who didn't run away. I was alone to do all the work, and because of that, I couldn't even sleep for days. It was when I reached my limit that I decided I needed to create a way to maintain the barriers automatically. I began living in the forest near the site. I hunted to survive and to stay alive when high-rank creatures tried to make me their meal. After 3 years, I was already 9 years old and was able to master barrier magic at an unbelievable level. I could create shields and even form a barrier around a monster to trap it. At 12 years old, I was still living in the forest and doing my job of maintaining the barrier in the demonic realm. The colossal and terrible creatures were no longer strong enough to attack me. By the age of 15, I could create barriers and move them freely. Now I had a new way to attack. I remember thinking, dragon meat is incredibly delicious. Has any other human ever tasted this? That was how I became the greatest specialist in defensive magic. I was capable of creating barriers and walking upon them. I lived in this forest protecting the barriers for over 30 years. I needed to fulfill my mission. So our story truly begins now.
When a hero gets beaten up by the Demon King, humans summon 100 mages. The mages create barriers against the demon realm while the heroes fight him. Year after year, teams of heroes try to defeat the demon and always lose. 30 years go by, and we see a 39-year-old barrier mage named Blake. One day, he leaves his house to check the state of the barrier and the monsters, and notices the demons are almost invading and the barrier has weakened. Fulfilling his task, he reinforces the barrier and drives the vile creatures away. He notices the barrier is less effective, and the amount of magic needed to maintain it has increased. So he prays that the new team of heroes will defeat the Demon King soon. Meanwhile, the heroes are giving everything they've got in the battle against the Demon King. A heroine uses her sword and delivers a massive blow, fatally wounding the Demon King and eliminating him once and for all. She celebrates and tells all the heroes to let out a victorious cheer. Blake notices that the heroes have defeated the demons and is shocked. When the miasma finally disappears, it sinks in that the Demon King has been defeated. After 30 years, the miasma and the monsters are gone, and the world will now be at peace. He expects a reward for having spent 30 years maintaining the barrier to protect those inside. A month passes, and a knight shows up saying he's no longer needed. He claims Blake wasted public funds on a useless barrier and calls him a fraud. Blake tries to justify it by saying he kept the barrier up to prevent the miasma and monsters from entering. The knights keep belittling him and kick him out of his cabin, saying it belongs to the kingdom. After 30 years of hard work, the barrier mage never imagined things would end this way. He has no choice but to return to his hometown and stop by an adventurer's guild. There he receives a minimal reward for all his years of hard work. The woman running the place says he's a stuck-up barrier mage and doesn't deserve any more than that. Our protagonist is sad to receive so little even after working so hard his whole life. This makes him wonder if his barrier is really that useless. The next day, he has no other job options and needs to cover his living expenses, so he asks the guildmaster for a job. The old woman says there's no work for people like him, since mages like that are useless. The other adventurers mock him, saying he won't even find lousy jobs. They start laughing in his face for being a now useless barrier mage, until royal knights walk into the establishment looking for the mage named Blake. Our protagonist introduces himself as the barrier mage, and the royal knights ask him to accompany them to the royal capital on the heroine's orders. The adventurers who mocked him are shocked to see him summoned by the heroine. He apologizes for the hurry, and the royal knights quickly leave in the carriage toward the capital. Meanwhile, the guild adventurers consider apologizing, afraid they'll be punished. Our protagonist isn't used to this kind of comfort in a carriage. Thinking about being summoned by the heroine, he remembers having helped her once, and wonders if she remembers him from the day he saved her life. He finally arrives in Hendria, the royal capital of Niston. Noticing the city is huge, he's never seen so many people gathered in one place. As soon as he enters the royal castle, he feels out of place because it's so fancy. Alice, the 18-year-old heroine, is overjoyed the moment she sees Blake. The girl asks if he remembers the day he helped her on the front lines against the demons. She's really happy that he remembers that day when he helped her. Then she thanks him for saving her life that day, since she was far from her teammates. Blake gets embarrassed and doesn't know how to react to the compliments. Alice says the other heroes also want to see him, but they couldn't come because they were busy. Then she asks what he plans to do now that he must be in high demand for his work on the barrier. Our hero pretends he hasn't decided yet, but in truth, he's unemployed. Alice suggests he should join the Royal Mages. Gunther, the vice captain of the Royal Mages, says they are elite mages and barrier mages are not allowed in. Annoyed, the heroine says that thanks to the barrier mages, the monsters and miasma were held back. Gunther tells her not to exaggerate, since the monsters were afraid of the Royal Mages. That's why they didn't invade. He claims that the barrier only has power to block miasma, and that they could have dealt with it anyway. That makes Blake conclude that barrier mages are seen as useless by the public. But 30 years ago, everyone respected them, and now their reputation has fallen greatly. On top of that, the vice captain says Blake is already old, and they prefer to work with promising young talent. When he adds that Blake isn't even skilled, Alice wants to prove him wrong. Gunther says that can be proven if Blake is skilled enough to defeat him in combat. He adds that Blake is an old man and they can't just accept anyone like him. The heroine asks what he wants to do and says she believes Blake can beat Gunther in a duel. Suddenly, the protagonist accepts the duel against the vice captain of the 5th Division of Royal Mages. Answering the challenge, he actually didn't even want to fight this guy. Gunther reintroduces himself and makes a small fireball in his hand. He warns he doesn't want to hear any whining when the barrier mage gets eliminated, and then he launches a giant fireball at his opponent. All the royal mages think the battle is already over and expected as much from the vice captain. Convinced he won, Gunther says it was easy to defeat a mere barrier mage. But seeing something move, he asks who dares interrupt his moment of victory. And Blake stands up and asks when the actual trial is going to begin. Everyone is shocked to see he survived the vice captain's spell without a scratch. Gunther thinks it's impossible because he cast a spell meant to reduce the mage to ashes. Trying to understand how the old man survived, he thinks maybe he held back and prepares to cast a stronger spell. He tells the old man not to dodge if he really thinks he can withstand his magic. Our protagonist doesn't dodge and creates a barrier to block the incoming spell. Irritated, the vice captain hurls multiple fireballs to finish him off. The mages think that's overkill, since no one could survive such attacks. Our hero finds Gunther's magic far too weak. He wonders if the kid is still going easy on him. Convinced he's already won, Gunther is stunned to see that Blake is still alive. The vice captain can't believe it, since he thought he was dealing with a low-level barrier mage. He mocks him for only knowing how to create barriers, calling him useless because he can't attack. Telling him to strike back, Blake says he'll do it, though a bit embarrassed. Blake uses a barrier spell to attack and throws his enemy far away, hurting him badly. All the royal mages are shocked when the 5th Division's vice captain is sent flying. His enemy never thought it was possible to attack with a barrier. Our protagonist explains that he simply moved his barrier and smashed it into his opponent's face. Gunther says it makes no sense for a barrier to move, it should be static. A bit embarrassed, the barrier mage explains that after 30 years he got the hang of it. He asks if it counts as cheating, since a barrier shouldn't be mobile. The royal mages think the barrier mage is outclassing Gunther, as he's completely unharmed. With his ego wounded, the vice captain wonders how he's losing to such trash. And seeing the judgmental stares from the other royal mages, he knows he must win now. He creates a wall of fire behind our protagonist. But without even thinking much, Blake creates a barrier behind his back and blocks the attack, leaving all the royal mages stunned and Alice pleased. Disoriented, Gunther wonders if someone threw a rock at him or if something tried to hit him. That's when he realizes the barrier activates by itself. Alice says this is proof that Blake is stronger and Gunther won't get away with it next time. Even more terrified and unhinged, the vice captain refuses to let the fight end like this. After all, failing to take down a barrier mage will only disappoint Alice. The mages start fleeing because he's casting an advanced spell, and even they might get caught in it. Gunther yells that he's going to use all his power to eliminate Blake. He summons a massive firestorm down upon our hero. While all the mages flee, Blake doesn't even seem to care about the spell. Alice knows a normal barrier wouldn't be able to block this advanced spell, but Blake's can. Then she remembers the day she was saved by the barrier mage. He used several mini barriers to defeat the demons and save her life. That makes her certain he won't lose this fight. After all, he does the same thing he did that day, using his barriers to cut through the attack. Falling to his knees, the vice captain can't believe his strongest spell didn't work. Noticing the captain is out of magic, they ask if the barrier mage won. Alice announces that the mage from the barrier squad is victorious and that he can join the royal mages. She says he built barriers to protect the world for 30 years. And that is a tremendous feat. Gunther tries to argue, saying he wasn't alone and had other mages with him. One of the knights says that according to the reports, the other barrier mages didn't contribute. The vice captain is shocked to learn he acted alone during all those years. For many reasons, abandoning their duties or misusing funds, they gradually disappeared. So Blake maintained the barriers against the demon realm alone for 30 years. Now our protagonist understands why the barriers kept demanding more and more magic. His opponent thinks this is a lie, as the demon realm is bigger than the kingdom of Hendria. He finds it impossible that the old mage could have maintained a barrier of that scale by himself. Alice thinks Blake is proving to be even better than she expected. Suddenly, Captain Lancelot of the 1st Division arrives to understand what's going on. Lancelot is 29 years old and captain of the 1st Division of the Royal Mages. As the top leader, he's the head of the 1st Royal Mage Division, and most people there had never seen him before. He asks Vice Captain Gunther from this division to explain the recent events. Alice had recommended the barrier mage Blake to join the Royal Mage Squad, and Gunther doubted him. Lancelot understands that she then conducted a practical test, and he sees that Gunther from the 5th Division lost the duel. Trying to justify himself, Gunther says he held back and that it wouldn't have been right to go all out against a weak mage. The captain of the 1st Division tells him to stop with those pathetic excuses. After all, regardless of title, if you have skill, you'll be allowed to join. He welcomes Blake, who is now a member of the Royal Mage Squad. The other members find it strange that a barrier mage is being allowed to join the squad. Our protagonist is surprised they let him enter the Royal Mage Squad. He wonders if someone like him, who only worked with barriers for 30 years, will be able to handle it. Alice congratulates the barrier mage, saying she always believed in him. Our hero thanks Alice, and she says it's time to celebrate and eat something. However, Lancelot appears behind her and says they don't have time for that. They begin taking her back to work, and the girl tries to resist. The captain then asks what kind of relationship the mage has with her, since Alice seems to like him quite a bit. Blake says they're just acquaintances, and Lancelot mentions that there are many opportunists who get close to her. Gunther from the 5th Division watches everything with rage and envy. A few days go by, and our protagonist arrives at the Royal Mage's dormitory. Looking for his room, the students comment that he's way too old to be in that place. Our protagonist feels embarrassed by the negative comments and searches for his room. Finding the door to room 206, just as he's about to enter, someone appears. Even, a 16-year-old recruit from the Royal Mage Squad, asks who he is. Blake introduces himself, saying he's his new roommate, and even doesn't like that he's so much older. The boy is shocked to learn that he was recommended by the heroine herself and defeated Gunther. He accuses the mage of lying, and Blake understands, because it really does sound like a lie. Even makes a scene, saying his life is over now that this old man is on the same team. He explains that roommates always work in the same division team for recruits. Our MC apologizes for being old and says he'll do his best not to get in the way. The redhead stops making a scene and comments that his hair is a mess. He offers to give him a haircut so it won't get in the way of training. After finishing the haircut for our hero, he thanks him and even feels lighter. Then training time arrives, and the two put on their uniforms to go train. Two other 16-year-old recruit girls show up, Clara and Therese. Both ask who the old man is, since they've never seen him before and ended up on the same team as him. Finally, we see the protagonist with his hair cut and a cleaner appearance, introducing himself as Blake. The girls wonder why an old man ended up on their team and find it strange that he's a recruit. Clara warns that Therese is going too far, even if she agrees with her. Our protagonist understands them, since all the recruits are young, and he's the only old man there. A representative introduces the old man, saying he'll be joining them from today on. Then Blake introduces himself as a barrier mage, and says it's a pleasure to meet everyone. At that moment, everyone realizes he's the barrier mage who defeated the vice captain. The two girls talk among themselves, unable to believe that this old man beat Gunther. The redhead thinks they're screwed because he feels like the old guy must be weak given his occupation. Meanwhile, the 5th Division's vice captain continues glaring angrily at our protagonist. The representative explains that everyone here is a new recruit and has no assigned division yet. That's why the training results will decide which division they'll go to. They're not officially enlisted yet. He then explains they'll carry out a survival exercise and hunt monsters in the Mecha Forest. They will have 2 weeks to earn points, and the recruits focus on the survival exercises. After all, the place is filled with miasma and monsters, and they think Blake got unlucky. He even becomes pessimistic, saying Mecha Forest is no place for beginners. As everyone gets ready, he tells the barrier mage not to get in their way. Each team has a dragon carriage that will take them to their starting point. Meanwhile, Gunther intends to show the barrier mage what hell looks like. As soon as they arrive at the forest, everyone is startled by how strange the place is. He even asks why their starting point is on top of a mountain miles away from the forest. He says they're screwed and that he thought he'd be joining the Royal Mage Squad and living his dream. A girl tells him to stop whining because it's pathetic and he should be a leader who shows confidence. He even keeps complaining that they're unlucky and says he didn't even want to be the leader, which annoys the girl. Blake tells them to start checking the map to see where they are. Looking at the map, they realize they're a bit far but can make it in time if they hurry. Our protagonist tells them to move as fast as possible so they can arrive on time for the competition. They see no other option and decide to give it their all. They cross a mountain and part of the forest filled with rocks. They complain about the heavy luggage making it hard to walk and feel like they're not even close to the forest yet. Meanwhile, the old man hasn't even broken a sweat and seems used to this kind of mission. By nightfall, they finally arrive at Mecha Forest. They see the thick miasma, and a normal person would die instantly just from entering it. Clara says their target is a level 2 Komodo dragon and even has the location of its nest. The barrier mage asks what level means, and the redhead is shocked that he doesn't know. He explains that monsters are ranked in 10 levels of strength, and level 3 is far too strong for rookies like them. Blake thanks him, saying the info was really helpful and even feels validated. The two girls move ahead and leave the others behind. A few seconds later, the group starts walking together again, until they hear noises in the bushes behind them. They notice 3 vicious goblins coming in to attack. The redhead knows these are level 1 monsters and plans to handle them himself. He fires a fireball and takes down one of them right away, but the other 2 charge at him and attack with full force. Clara tells him never to let his guard down and uses a purple spell to save him and defeat the goblin. Even says he didn't need her help to deal with goblins. There he starts healing the boy after noticing he got slightly hurt. Meanwhile, the old man watches everything from a distance and even says he could have helped a little. The group says he didn't even want help because he insisted on facing them alone. They continue walking until a large carnivorous plant appears. The plant quickly attacks the barrier mage, knocking him to the ground. But he ends up without a single scratch, and to the group it looks like he fell for no reason. He says he found a path as he fell and tells them to follow it, but even doesn't like the idea. Meanwhile, he defeats the monster with his barrier and the group doesn't even notice. He just pretends nothing happened. After that, the 2 girls follow in the direction the guys pointed. Our protagonist comments that he hears the sound of water coming from a certain direction. After they rest for a bit, he says it's time to keep walking, and several monsters watch them from the shadows. The group starts to fall asleep while the old man stays awake to keep watch over them. A huge monstrous lion appears behind him and roars, trying to bite him. But his barrier activates on its own, stopping the monster, and Blake doesn't even lift a finger. Even wakes up because of the noise, and the mage says it was nothing. Then he offers to take over the watch, but Blake tells him to go back to sleep. Happy about it, even thanks the old man, who stays up continuing the watch. The redhead notes they barely encountered any monsters and thinks they're lucky, unaware that it's because of Blake. Everyone finds it strange they've only come across weak creatures and wonder if the mage is doing something. Clara says it's a good thing, since walking is already exhausting and fighting monsters would only make it worse. Gunther assumes the old man must have died since he sent them to the harshest location possible. Even if they reach their objective, a monster worse than a Komodo dragon will be waiting. The team then encounters a massive and terrifying level 4 salamander, a monster that can burn a person to ashes with a single breath, and they all consider running away. But another giant salamander appears, surrounding the team. Even falls to his knees in despair, saying there's no way they can defeat both monsters. The girls are terrified as soon as the salamander starts breathing fire aggressively, but they realize it's not hot because they're protected by a barrier created by the mage Blake. The captain and vice captain are completely shocked that the salamander's flames are being blocked by the barrier. Then the other salamander also breathes a whirlwind of fire, which doesn't burn even. He realizes the barrier is protecting all of them, but still thinks there's no way they'll escape. Suddenly, our protagonist starts to step outside the barrier and says he's going to face both monsters. The redhead is in shock when the old man says he's going out and that they should stay inside the barrier. He begs the old man not to use himself as bait, thinking a barrier mage can't possibly defeat 2 salamanders. Clara believes they can't let him sacrifice himself in vain and tries to leave the barrier to flee, but even doesn't want to abandon the old man, and the girl says there's no way they can defeat the salamanders. The trio wonders what's going on when suddenly our hero strikes. He severs the salamander's head from its body with a precise slash using a barrier. Everyone is stunned when he defeats one salamander in an instant, but the other one starts to fill its body with fire, preparing to unleash a breath attack. As soon as it releases the whirlwind of flames, our hero jumps high and dodges it. Then he lands on the ground and conjures a barrier. The salamander becomes afraid as the barrier charges at it in a zigzag pattern. Meanwhile, our protagonist creates barrier gauntlets and wraps them around his fists. Charging at the creature, he delivers a punch straight down into its face. The punch is explosive, destroying everything around and slamming the salamander into the ground. After annihilating the monster, he picks up his things as if nothing had happened. He feels nostalgic, recalling how he used to defeat many lizards in the forest, and finds these a bit weak for level 4. His team is shocked by his level of strength and begins to praise the old man. He finds it odd that they think of him as strong, but it makes sense. He used barriers to hunt monsters. Therese is surprised that he defeated 2 salamanders with barrier magic instead of only using it for defense. She realizes this man is not normal. He can move barriers and is incredibly powerful. Meanwhile, Gunther is absolutely convinced the barrier mage has already died. After all, it was a treacherous path filled with hordes of monsters, ending in a salamander nest. He's certain the entire group didn't survive the route. The supervisor says they did a great job, and that Team F is the first to arrive at the final destination. Gunther is confused that they're alive and were the first ones to arrive. Trying to stay calm, he tells himself they must have run away and probably didn't collect the monster materials, but they brought back salamander fangs, the best result any group has ever achieved in history. The vice captain is stunned that a failed group managed to defeat 2 level 4 monsters. He then congratulates Team F and adds those accomplishments to their points. The mages wonder why there were salamanders on a route that was only supposed to have low-level creatures. Even can't believe they were the best, and Clara says it was all thanks to the old man. In addition to defeating the salamanders, Blake guided them back, and they wouldn't have made it without him. The old man said that's not true, because they overcame the obstacles together by working as a team. Even says he just gave a little help and didn't do much. And the team thanks the old man, saying he's a really cool guy. They admit they had more setbacks along the way than the other teams, and it felt like too much of a coincidence. Gunther feels full of hatred and doesn't want to let this go, wishing to take revenge on the barrier mage. A few days pass, and their training will now be in competition format. Even complains that there isn't much room, and they decide to move to the second area, where there are fewer people. The vice captain gives a sinister smile, as if he's planning something involving Blake. The old man and the redhead are about to start dueling. Meanwhile, Gunther says he'll be instructing the team, which makes them wonder why the vice captain personally came to their training field. He tells them to get into position and stop whispering, and says the barrier mage doesn't need to join. Gathering the trio and excluding the old man, he says the class is about to begin. A few seconds later, Therese is already on the ground, injured. Clara immediately begins healing her. Meanwhile, Gunther tells them to take it more seriously. If they were fighting monsters, they'd already be dead. The three get up as the man says the lesson hasn't even started yet. When our protagonist steps in to intervene, the arrogant mage tells him to stay out of it. Seeing Blake outraged, that's exactly the reaction Gunther wanted, to make the mage feel powerless. He then tells Even to stand up and get in position, saying that if he doesn't comply, he'll force them to move using his fire magic. He casts a fire whirlwind spell and throws it at the trio of recruits. After attacking the young team, he claims his hand slipped and blames the barrier mage for insulting him, saying they shouldn't misunderstand. He didn't eliminate them, just disciplined them a bit too harshly, and maybe burned them a little. As the smoke starts to clear, he wants to see the miserable state of the mage's companions, but they're not burned at all because he cast a barrier around his teammates. Gunther is in shock that they didn't suffer a single scratch. Even realizes it was the old man's barrier that saved their lives. The vice captain is angry that the mage managed to do something even without him noticing. The royal mages think it's odd that the vice captain is fighting Team F. He justifies it by saying he was training the recruits, but they've reached their limits. The redhead says that wasn't training, it was an assault, and he doesn't want Gunther to get away with it. The light-haired girl wants to beat her own teammates, saying that they can still continue the lesson and they won't lose. The mages are surprised that they still want to continue even while exhausted and cheer for them to beat Gunther. The vice captain knows that if he stops now, people will start saying awful things about him. Therese heals her two teammates, and they decide to work together to win. Gunther calls them losers and says they'll never beat him in a duel, casting more fire magic, which they manage to avoid, because another barrier appears and protects them, leaving the captain furious. Then Clara and Even, now angry with the deceitful mage, start casting their own spells. He gets hit and injured by their combined magic. Even more furious, he reveals his true face and says he won't let them get away with this. At that moment, the old man steps in front of the two and spreads his arms to protect them. Meanwhile, the other royal mages shout for Gunther to stop what he's doing. He claims he was just instructing the team, but they tell him to stop making excuses. Realizing that he held a grudge against Blake, they understand now why he targeted Team F. Another captain says Gunther is dismissed from his duties and might even be fired. That makes the man explode with rage, demanding to know why he has to suffer like this. He blames Blake entirely, placing all his anger and frustration on the barrier mage. After that, they take a break, and Blake gets the rest he deserves, finding it satisfying to see Gunther fall. Clara says the starting point of the exercise had been a petty move by the vice captain. The old man apologizes for causing trouble for the team, even says it wasn't his fault. They ask how he became so strong, since he used barriers that no one had ever seen before. Before he can explain, a woman arrives under orders from the wise witch Edda to escort Blake. The man is confused, and the woman drags him away, saying they're in a hurry. The two girls find it strange that Edda, from the heroine's group, was the one who summoned him. They arrive at the Magic Research Institute in the Kingdom of Hendria. Edda, the wise witch and 13-year-old director of the Research Institute, happily reunites with the mage. The protagonist is glad to see her doing well after so long. She gets angry at him for treating an extraordinary and genius witch, who appears only once every century, like a child. But in truth, Edda doesn't care, and our hero apologizes to her. Getting straight to the point, the witch summoned the mage because she needs his strength to capture monsters. She explains that physical cages don't work on enraged monsters, and some species emit miasma, so their research has been limited to the monsters' natural habitats, which is an inefficient method. Her wish is to capture monsters and study them at the Magic Research Institute. They might even find a countermeasure for miasma. She knows that heroes are protected by the goddess and can block miasma, which is why they're able to enter the demon realm. Returning to the original topic, the witch asks if he can capture monsters above level 5. Her assistant says she's overestimating barrier mages, but at that moment, the protagonist says he thinks he can capture monsters above level 5. The witch seems convinced by Blake's words. Our protagonist believes he can handle level 5 since the salamanders were level 4. The assistant thinks it's absurd for him to promise that in front of Edda and believes he won't be able to complete the task. However, our protagonist says he'll be fine, and she thinks he's lying about all of this. Meanwhile, the witch has already decided that Blake will cooperate. She won't tolerate any objections from her attendants, who immediately apologize. She says not to worry about the mage squad and that she'll send them a formal request. Edda's attendant is angry that this mage is taking advantage of her. In this case, she feels the need to protect the little girl. Our protagonist senses a bad omen and starts to feel uneasy. The witch announces that they're heading to the abandoned mine of Burburn. All of Edda's witches mount their dragons to set off on the mission. The witch says she's lucky to have met with him again so soon, and the MC says he already met with Alice. Edda says Alice is always like that, seeming overly cheerful. The attendant wonders why he's getting along so well with her mistress. She claims that if the mage hadn't saved them in the forest, they would have all died. That day, the hero was hunting in the Demon King's forest when he accidentally found Alice and saved her. He remembers being in the forest of death and seeing the girl wounded on the ground. Alice said her companions were also in danger and asked him to save them too. Our hero searched the area and found Edda surrounded by monsters. The forest of death messes with the senses of anyone who enters it, which is why the team got separated. So if he hadn't saved them, everyone would have died in that place. Being modest, our protagonist says it wasn't a big deal, and the girl finds that very kind of him. He notices that the girl seems to be having fun, and he feels jealous. He spent his whole life maintaining the barrier since he was 9. He even wonders if Edda plays like the children he sees on the streets. The girl confidently says she's a genius mage from birth and doesn't play with children, but she almost seems like she wants him to go play with them. A few days later, he arrives at the abandoned mine of Burburn. They notice there's a lot of miasma, and it seems dangerous for the weaker mages. Blake says he'll create a barrier so everyone can walk inside, and they think it's impossible to make a barrier move. To prove he can, our protagonist creates a barrier around himself and enters the area filled with miasma. The weaker mages find it outrageous to go into a place with such dense miasma. Suddenly, he returns and asks if they're coming too, proving the barrier worked. Edda explains that this is one of the effects of Blake's barrier and tells them to leave the dragon carriages outside. Seeing the mobile barrier surrounding them, everyone wonders if it will really protect them from the miasma. The jealous attendant says something of that level shouldn't even be praised. Our hero warns them there are monsters nearby, and that they can sense a source of miasma inside. Blake suspects there's a creature causing it, but the mage says it could also be a cursed object. After all, cursed objects, whether made by humans or naturally occurring in dark places, can generate miasma. Sometimes, powerful monsters that produce this kind of miasma are also born from those objects. And this same smoke creates monsters, which in turn intensify it even more. Thus, more monsters are generated, and the Demon King was a good example of this vicious cycle. Moreover, if the monster producing miasma is defeated, the others created by it also disappear. That's why, when the Demon King was defeated, half the monsters in his kingdom vanished. However, not all the monsters in the world disappeared. Edda believes that if they understand the principles behind monster creation, they can develop countermeasures. Suddenly, she nearly trips over a rock, and our protagonist catches her. Being kind, he asks if she's okay and says the ground is very dark. When he offers to carry the girl on his back, her attendant scolds him, saying not to treat her like a child. She's a prodigy. The witch says she's fine and tells them to keep moving forward through the abandoned mine. Suddenly, the demonic smoke grows denser, and further ahead, a minotaur appears roaring, a level 5 monster. Blake thinks it would be interesting to capture this creature, but the witch's attendant is the one who will handle it. All the witches accompanying Edda start casting spells at the monster. Just before the spell hits, the monster roars and stops their magic. The girls get scared, and Edda says ordinary mages won't be able to capture it. She says they'll need the barrier mage, and her attendant insists Edda should be the one to capture the minotaur. They decide to leave it to the wise witch, though she doesn't look too comfortable with the situation. She steps forward hesitantly and approaches the massive minotaur, holding her staff nervously, right up until the moment the creature charges at her. Edda seems to be preparing a spell, and the monster is just about to strike her with its axe. Just as it's about to hit her, a barrier appears, saving her life. The other witches are shocked when a giant barrier surrounds the minotaur, realizing that the barrier mage Blake is the one maintaining it. They ask him not to interfere with Edda, but she quickly tells them to be quiet. She says they brought Blake to capture the creature, though she's afraid the barrier might break. However, a refined barrier can block and purify the miasma and weaken the monster. The weakest mage didn't know barriers could be so effective in suppressing a monster. Thus, a level 5 monster is rendered completely powerless, showing the level of Blake's barrier strength. Not even Edda, the wise witch, could do something like that. She announces to all her attendants that thanks to Blake, they were able to capture the monster and should now return. She states that the barrier mage saved them all and asks them to bring the monster along. Seeing the girl walk away upset, the protagonist seems to understand what's going through her mind. Moments later, she thanks her people for their work and says they can now study the monster's physiology. Using the large level 5 Minotaur as a reference, she finds barriers very convenient since they can easily move such a large body. She asks how long the barrier can be sustained, and he says that as long as he stays nearby, it can last forever. However, regular barriers tend to lose effect when the magic runs out, and the girl finds that a bit problematic. The attendant suggests recapturing the monster using Edda's magic instead. Our protagonist says he can solve the issue using a paper with a magical symbol. He explains that it's a magic circle he created to maintain demonic barriers, and it works automatically. The girl remembers seeing something similar in the demon realm, but she's never seen a magic circle like that. When she says the creator must be incredible, he thanks her, hinting that he's the one who made it. Our protagonist says he created that magic circle when he was 9 years old. 30 years ago, the miasma from the demon realm was destroying the entire continent, and they gathered many barrier mages. At first, they were trying to maintain the barrier manually, without leaving the site, so he created the magic circle. It only needed to be fueled with mana, and it could sustain itself for a long time, letting them rest and eat. So with 100 people maintaining the barrier with this magic, they were able to cover the entire demon realm. But in the end, only he was left taking care of the barriers. As a result, it drained a lot of his magic and was difficult to maintain alone. The witches acknowledged that he did something incredible and asked if he doesn't feel proud of that feat. Our hero prefers to leave that whole story aside for now and says he doesn't think it was that big of a deal. Then he moves on to activate the magic circle. As soon as he activates it, the barrier begins to sustain itself and keeps the Minotaur trapped. This process may last several hours, and he plans to stay nearby during the research. Hedda thanks Mage Blake for his help. They then begin the research and analysis of the monster and the miasma. She assigns the mages to different roles in the research, and the protagonist stays through the entire process. After all the mages leave for home, Blake notices that Edda is the only one who stays behind. The girl says she prepared a room for him in the lab where he can go to sleep. She says she'll push the research forward quickly to protect the citizens from these threats. The protagonist wants to stay with her during the process, out of concern for Edda, even though she objects, but he says he's only worried the barrier might fail since it's the first time he's created an injectable barrier. The girl then allows him to do things his own way, and our protagonist proceeds accordingly. A week passes, with the Minotaur still trapped inside the barrier created by our mage. Our protagonist decides to step outside and talk to Edda's assistant. He doesn't want to interfere in their internal politics, but he asks why everyone leaves early except the witch. The girl says that since he's not from there, he shouldn't get involved. Blake says that Edda has been conducting the research alone all this time and asks if they're not going to help her. The girl replies that the witch is a genius and that ordinary people can't help her, not just in magic, but in research too. No one can keep up with the girl. That's why they try to do what's within their reach during working hours without getting in Edda's way. She suggests that the mage go home too since he can't help much anyway. As soon as he returns to the room, the 13-year-old witch has fallen asleep. Being kind, our protagonist takes off his coat and covers her. A few days later, the girl announces that it's break time. Everyone heads to the cafeteria while she eats alone. Blake says she should take a break instead of being holed up in the lab. Edda replies that she'll go to her room later and didn't want to keep him stuck in the lab. She then asks him not to worry about her and tells him to take a break too. Everyone goes to the cafeteria to eat a grand feast. Meanwhile, the witch is conducting research alone, deeply focused, with no one accompanying her. The research is at such a high level that no one understands what she's doing. They comment that she could have captured the monster by herself without the barrier mage. Her most loyal companion says that if they leave everything to her, it'll all work out. But our protagonist disagrees, and the mages get worked up about it. Blake says that constantly praising her and leaving everything on her shoulders isn't mature. She's still a child. The woman tells him to stop treating her like a child because she's the greatest genius in the kingdom's history. All the mages agree that while she looks like a child, she's already an adult and that he understands nothing about her. The protagonist agrees that she's a brilliant researcher and mage, more capable than most adults, but that doesn't change the fact that she's still a child who looks at others with envy. And during the fight with the Minotaur, she froze, because as brilliant as she is, she's also kind. That's why she acts the way adults expect her to. He says it's absurd for them to claim with such confidence that she's an adult. He asks if they've ever had an honest conversation with the witch to understand her feelings, or if they never actually wanted to help Edda. All the mages there are left speechless and decide to leave, lost in thought. At that moment, the witch appears with a sad and tired expression. Our protagonist tries to talk to her, but she turns away and leaves without saying anything. Later in his room, Blake hears a knock at the door. The 13-year-old witch enters and asks if they can talk for a moment. He prepares some coffee for the girl, and she apologizes for the inconvenience. Our hero wraps a blanket around her since it's cold, and she thanks him. She drinks the coffee in an innocent way. She apologizes for dragging him into her problems, and he admits that he got involved on his own. She says that at first, she was excited to work with the mages, but things changed later on, because everyone started calling her a genius, and everything became easier. But she knows they began doing the bare minimum and dumped all the work on her. It's always been that way. The people around her ended up changing because of her. They were just regular folks from a normal village. There were no nobles or mages in her family, only simple speech. Then she quickly learned to speak and later to walk. She learned to read from a book her parents had at home. Still very young, she became fascinated with magic and was already considered a genius. From that day on, she began receiving magic lessons. She quickly became an extraordinary mage with immense talent. Everyone started calling her a genius and a prodigy, expecting her to be independent. She was forced to act like an adult instead of a child and had to grow up very fast. For mages, research and combat are their life's mission. Soon, she began researching and training in combat at the age of 6, and she was very desperate at the time. She had to meet the expectations of her parents and everyone around, always being a genius, not a child. For that reason, she had to try to harden her heart, but deep down, she still feels sadness. Our protagonist realizes that she's also afraid of monsters. After all, when he saved Edda back then, they faced a minotaur, and even at that time, she seemed quite scared. The girl says he's very observant for noticing that. After all, she really is afraid of facing creatures. When she was part of the heroine's team, the Vanguard fought monsters directly, and she stayed in support. But she's so afraid of monsters that she can't fight alone. And our protagonist understands, he's also afraid of fighting creatures. Even if he suppresses his fear during battle, he fought every day until fear lost its effect on him, so he could survive. The girl wanted to do the same, but Blake tells her she doesn't need to. She's fine the way she is. However, everyone wants her to be strong, stronger than most, and to be a genius. And she wants to do her best so she doesn't disappoint anyone and can defeat monsters. In the end, she's afraid of being abandoned, that her parents will see her as useless or talentless, that the people around her will stop thinking she's a genius and leave her because of that. She starts to panic, begging people not to abandon her, promising she'll be a genius and act like an adult, desperately pleading not to be left behind. At that moment, our protagonist gently strokes her head and says everything will be okay. He promises he'll never abandon the witch Edda. He says her life has been really hard and that she's already suffered enough. In that moment, he acknowledges that she's done a great job, and the witch breaks down in tears and hugs the barrier mage, saying all she really wanted was to play with her friends, eat sweets, and spend time with her family. Even though she loves researching, she hates fighting monsters because she's afraid of getting hurt. She wanted to ask for help because children usually depend on adults. But in her case, since she's a genius, no one wants to help her because they already think she's an adult. Blake tells her she doesn't have to try so hard and that she can ask him for help. The protagonist promises that whenever she has a hard time, she can count on him. The two of them hug, and she thanks our hero deeply, falling asleep in his lap while holding his hand. He remembers a time in his life when he found the girl lying on the forest floor after saving her, putting her to sleep and taking care of her when she was hurt. Blake stayed by her side the whole time while she was recovering, and years later, he's doing the same with the now older girl. As she's trying to fall asleep, she asks the mage not to leave her alone. Our hero says he's right by her side and not going anywhere. A few days pass, and they go out for a walk in the city together, with the girl dressed casually. A few days before they went to the park, the girl held a meeting with her mages, asking everyone to give their best in the research. Everyone worked very hard, including the girl. In the following days, she kept asking for help from everyone and put great effort into the research, until one moment when she got exhausted and needed a hug from Blake, saying she was so tired she couldn't take it anymore. Our protagonist gently comforted her and gave lots of hugs to the little girl. Realizing that Edda was under extreme stress, he wanted to help her. Thinking of something they could do together, he knew she had a day off and invited her out. Immediately, the girl said she wanted to go out with Uncle Blake. The next day, they met at the city market, dressed casually. The two began their stroll, and the witch noticed how many people were in the city. The witch said it was her first time at the main street market because she never had the chance to go out. Blake said that since it was her first time there, it was going to be a lot of fun. They started trying out all sorts of sweets, and as soon as Edda saw other kids, she started playing with them. That made our protagonist very happy, and in the late afternoon, she said goodbye to her friends. The girl smiled a lot, and they passed by a shop selling necklaces and jewelry. Our protagonist asked if she liked anything, and she looked for a necklace. Then our hero said he would buy one, and Eda offered to pay. But the barrier mage said this would be a gift for her. The girl was very happy with her necklace and thanked him for the present. Even the shopkeeper said that Blake was a very kind father and that his daughter was adorable. Instead of explaining the situation, they just went along with it as if they were father and daughter. A week later, the witch said she hadn't found a way to counter the miasma. Through her analysis, she saw that the barrier is effective in blocking and purifying the miasma, and plans to gather more barrier mages. The witch asked if she could count on Blake again, and he said yes. All the mages in the room apologized for having dumped everything on her and treating her like an adult. They had placed too much responsibility on a child and neglected their own work. They also admitted they were jealous of Blake, disrespected him a lot, and acted pridefully. They sincerely apologized and bowed before the two of them. Blake and the witch said it was all right and that they didn't mind those things. And she said that it's a problem for them to depend on her for everything, and that they should work harder. They apologized to Blake and said they now understood how important his barriers really are. They confessed that barrier magic is truly amazing. Eda asked why they were apologizing out of nowhere, and the woman said it was thanks to Blake. They had always felt like she wasn't doing well, and they knew it was partly their fault. But they hadn't had the courage to act and were afraid of confronting their own incompetence. After the mage scolded them and helped the witch smile again, that's when they apologized and admitted that Blake's techniques and personality are incredible. The 13-year-old witch said that she truly thinks Blake is an amazing person from the bottom of her heart. After the research concluded, our protagonist said goodbye to the group of mages. The witch said that if anything new came up, she would inform Blake. Then she asked when they'd play again, and he said they could play whenever she wanted. Everyone kindly said goodbye to the barrier mage. He had been away for a while and wondered if his group was doing well. When he arrived, the trio was upset that he took so long and said they were really worried. Our protagonist started telling them the story about capturing monsters. The redhead knew that very few had the privilege of entering the Research Institute's lab. The girls realized that for someone to be close to two members of the hero squad, their magic had to be seriously impressive. And they wondered who Blake really was. He asked if anything happened while he was away, and even said he would show him the results of their training in the training field. Once they arrived, the trio began demonstrating their magic all at once. Each of them cast a triple magic vortex that joined together in the end. The redhead felt like it should have been better and knew it's hard to get strong. Another group of mages said they barely passed the test and called them failures. In response, they admitted they really were failures and always came in last. He even asked if they were going to give up that easily and said depending on the old man wasn't a good idea. Tired of that, he said he didn't just want to give up or keep relying on the old guy. Some time passed, and the redhead was now on his knees, begging, asking Blake to teach him magic so he could grow stronger and not get expelled. He said he was going that far because he's the eldest son of a noble family from the countryside. In other words, his whole family is counting on him to succeed, but they're nobles only in name, as they never had luxury and always worked hard. Our MC said he could help, but only with barrier techniques, and the redhead already expected that. But he was surprised when Blake said he could teach him combat techniques too. The boy got excited, and they agreed to begin combat training the next day. A day passed, and the redhead asked what the girls were doing there. The girls said it wouldn't be easy to leave them behind, and they were going to learn from the old guy too. The MC said he had invited the two of them because they were feeling the same way as Even. The redhead got annoyed because he had to beg for it, and they didn't. Clara intends to uncover the secret behind Blake's strength and observe him more closely. However, he notices her strange timing, and she wants to do it without being noticed. They return to Mecha Forest, where they face monsters. He even casts his fire magic from his hands and attacks a creature. But just as he's convinced of his own strength, another one appears to attack him. He has to be saved by Blake and his mobile barrier magic, advising the boy to never let his guard down. Suddenly, many more monsters begin to appear, and the girls get scared. Blake tells them to observe, since if there are many enemies, they can use area magic. He then uses a spinning mobile barrier to strike all the enemies at once. The trio is surprised by his power, defeating the monsters with a single blow. They realize the old man is incredibly strong and ask how he does it. He says it's a long story about how he became so strong just by maintaining the barrier in the demon realm. After all, it happened 30 years ago when he was only 9 years old. Back then, when he showed potential as a barrier mage, he was taken to the demon realm. They were tasked with creating barriers to suppress the miasma and monsters of the realm. The pay was very limited, as were food and water, and then they were abandoned. Due to the nature of the mission, which required maintaining the barriers, they couldn't leave the area. He barely had time to sleep, continuing to maintain the barrier without food or supplies. He was at his limit, both physically and mentally. That's when he came up with the idea of creating a magic circle that would maintain the barrier automatically. Clara says very few people can do that, and assumes he failed. But in truth, our protagonist worked hard and managed to create it. In just a few days, he developed the circle that could be infused with his magic. That day, he slept as if there were no tomorrow. And a few days later, he gave his money to a merchant to deliver the barrier method to the other mages. He just needed to solve the problems of food and shelter, and asked to enter the forest to hunt. But it was full of monsters, and he had to run back. After all, the knights only delivered rations every few months. But after a while, even that came to an end. With no other choice, he had to venture into the forest again to find food, dodging monsters, gathering food from trees, and using his barrier spells. But it wasn't very rewarding, as the miasma was intense, and he had to purify the forest. With his current barrier techniques ineffective against monsters, he decided he needed to become stronger. From that point on, he began studying barrier techniques to find a solution. He trained hard and eventually succeeded in strengthening his barriers, managing to apply short-term restrictions and collect resources more easily. 3 years later, Blake was already 12 years old and entered the forest calmly since his barriers had become refined, restricting most monsters for several minutes, and with the miasma purified, his magic had increased and he could feel his growth clearly. However, he still didn't have the ability to defeat monsters effectively. The barriers were sturdy, but he couldn't move them or use them for attacks. So he continued studying and searching for ways to make his barriers mobile. Thanks to his efforts, after 3 years of training, he could move them with ease. He named his new attack style Offensive Barrier Technique. Finally able to eat meat again, the food tasted much better. However, it was purified monster meat to remove the miasma. Soon he studied even more barrier techniques, including shape, properties, and rigidity, gaining elasticity, viscosity, and changing all their properties. In this way, he developed his combat techniques using barriers. While explaining all of this, a monster prepares to spit fire at our protagonist. But without even looking, he creates a barrier and blocks the deadly breath. He then jumps over his own barrier and charges up an attack with his hand, a mobile barrier that he uses to slice the monster and annihilate it with ease. He explains that he became capable of changing the barrier's shape, turning it into a sword, for example. The trio is stunned that he defeated another salamander with a single attack. Even he doesn't fully recognize how strong he is, and now everyone understands the reason for his power and his impressive backstory. They acknowledge that his life was painful, and he doesn't even show how incredible he is. Blake says that if they put in the same effort he did, they can achieve it too, because they have potential. The girls find it strange that he says it so naturally. It even sounds a bit insensitive. The redhead isn't scared at all, because he wants to become strong like the mage and sees no other way. At that moment, the old man tells them to face the salamanders that appeared. He says that if they try hard, he's sure they can defeat that monster. But the trio is terrified and says there's no chance they can defeat the salamander on their own. The mages start praising Captain Lancelot, saying he's very young and very skilled. They call him Lord Lancelot the Flawless. The captain says they're exaggerating because he makes mistakes, and the men call him humble. He notices the bureaucrats who only know how to flatter him, and his students say they're right and that he became captain by merit. Lancelot says they're overestimating him, and his students defend him, calling him modest. But deep down, he knows he's not that great, just someone with above-average talent. Lately, however, his magical abilities have stagnated. He no longer has any goals to pursue. After all, the main duty of the Royal Mage Squad is to maintain public order. Without the Demon King, he thinks it's hard for opportunities to fight powerful enemies to arise. Even though peace is wonderful, sometimes he wonders how long he'll have to live up to everyone's expectations. A bureaucrat says the nearby villages are being attacked by low-level monsters. Lancelot knows he must create a training center for recruits and thinks about who will participate. We see the trio complaining about something that's happening. The protagonist offers them water and even asks how he can be so calm. After all, they're about to go on an expedition with the 1st Division. Our MC is used to fighting monsters, and they find that insane. They feel a little more confident because they trained with the old man and are stronger now. Other groups start calling them failures, as usual. Before a fight can break out, the commander orders everyone to stay in position. Lancelot says it'll take 2 weeks to reach the village, and they'll have to face dozens of level 3 monsters. They'll form squads of 4 members and keep formation the entire time. The commanders order them to begin the march toward the carriages to depart on the mission. They obey and begin marching, but they get extremely tired after marching non-stop for 6 hours. Everyone is exhausted because the hill is very steep. The commanders announce a 30-minute break, and everyone thanks them. But one of them gets annoyed with the young ones who were resting. He says the recruits should take care of the squad members and bring them food. So the trio of heroes has to massage the older members' shoulders. While the older ones sleep, the recruits don't get to rest and stand guard instead. 7 days later, they feel like they're about to die from exhaustion. None of the trio can handle everything that's happening, except for Blake, who seems perfectly fine and full of energy, offering water to the group. He says that in the past, he had similar experiences during his walks through the forest. The trio can't judge the old man, he just doesn't have normal standards. Even wonders where the other recruits are. The commanders say they ran off a long time ago. They say the trio is doing very well, since most recruits run away within the first few days. A jerk commander asks if Blake is the one who got in through Alice's recommendation. Then they mock him for being a middle-aged barrier mage. The redhead defends him, saying he got in through merit and they don't know how strong he really is. The commanders say the trio has become too full of themselves and has stopped respecting their superiors. Just when it looks like a fight is about to break out, Lancelot steps in to intervene and stop it. He asks the trio to stay out of trouble, and they thank him for stepping in. The commander can't believe he defeated Gunther and assumes he must be hiding his true strength. 14 days pass, and they finally arrive at a village destroyed by evil beings. A man says the villages have been constantly attacked by creatures. Crying, he says he knows where the monster's lair is and begs them to defeat them. Outside, we see the trio completely exhausted while Lancelot talks to the villager. Our hero returns and even apologizes for leaving the group leadership to him. The squad leaders start gathering to hear the commander's words. Lancelot states that the village chief is lying to them. Things are burned, but he saw no women and suspects they're being threatened by demons. Everyone is surprised by Lancelot's ability to see through the truth so quickly. He tells them not to consume anything from the village and knows the creatures will attack while they sleep. No one dares oppose the captain's plan to ambush the monsters, but our hero actually raises an objection and lifts his hand to offer an idea. The commanders tell recruit Blake to stop acting full of himself and to respect Lancelot's decision. But the captain tells them to cut it out, saying he doesn't care if he's a recruit or not. He wants to hear the man's opinion. Our protagonist thinks they won't be able to rescue the hostages who were captured with the current strategy. But the captain says he doesn't know where the enemies are, and Blake intends to search for them until nightfall. The others don't believe it will work since time is short and the villagers won't help. Blake says it's possible to track the monsters using his barrier detection techniques. He explains that this barrier detects targets within a certain perimeter. By turning the barrier into particles, he can register the movements of anything that touches it. This way, he can detect not only people and monsters, but anything with a physical form. The commanders think he's lying because, to them, barrier techniques are useless. To prove it works, he says there are two people behind him drinking water and yawning. They're shocked and think it was all staged with the barrier mage. Lancelot decides to let their squad locate the monster's hideout and rescue the hostages. The others believe that even if the recruits go on the offensive, it won't change the situation. However, the captain declares that the operation will begin at night. As night falls, the protagonist's group walks through the forest in search of the hideout. Even is happy that Lancelot gave such an important task to recruits like them. Theris thinks the captain doesn't actually believe they'll succeed, and they ask if the old man can really find the monsters. He says he can, but the range isn't very large, so they'll need to walk for a while. The team finds the old man abnormal for his age, and is no longer even surprised. Clara thinks this trio is amazing, and the barrier techniques are very powerful. But every time she's with him, she feels anxious and her heart beats fast. Meanwhile, the royal mages are sleeping in their cabins, and monsters begin to invade their rooms, ready to injure them. 3 vicious creatures reach Lancelot's bed and try to strike him with a knife. Before they can land a blow, the captain hurls them away with his magic. Realizing they're level 3 lizardmen, he thinks they're underestimating him. The other mages gather to attack the lizardmen and support their captain. At that moment, level 4 orcs also appeared to make things harder. They begin attacking furiously, hitting and injuring the royal mages. The mages start to panic from the orcs' furious attacks, but Lancelot shows up and attacks them with his fire spell, eliminating the threat. He continues searching for more monsters to strike down. His subordinates thank their captain, but then a level 6 orc lord appears, and they're terrified. They believe it's not the kind of enemy they can defeat due to its high level. At that moment, the captain steps in, and they say Lancelot is invincible. Taking the lead, he jumps over the giant orc and prepares 2 spells. Casting both simultaneously, he attacks the orc and the goblins at the same time. Once his extremely powerful magic fades, nothing remains of the monsters. He lands on the ground, and everyone comments on how incredible the captain is. Seeing that the monsters are organized, he knows there's a commander behind them. Suddenly, something starts to emerge, and they wonder what it is and begin to feel afraid. Meanwhile, the group enters a mine and finds the women being held hostage. They rescue all of them, who are eternally grateful. Our protagonist notices something strange and heads toward it. Suddenly, a massive and intelligent orc begins speaking to Lancelot, asking if he feels oppressed in the presence of the great Barbarossa. The royal mages realize he's a level 8 being and believe their captain will win. The giant orc soon tries to attack the squad of royal mages with his weapon. Lancelot used a lot of magic in the previous battles and can only cast one more high-level spell. He can't afford to miss. The royal mages are confident their captain won't lose and will defeat the giant monster. Dodging several of the monster's strikes, the captain is focused, thinking of himself as invincible, until suddenly, one blow lands and sends him flying, leaving everyone scared. The gigantic monster declares this will be the end of Captain Lancelot. When he hits the ground, he destroys everything with his massive weapon. But the monster becomes frightened when he sees a magical barrier that protected and saved him. The one who created the barrier was Blake, our protagonist. The barrier mage says he arrived just in time, and the royal mages are shocked that he was able to stop the giant axe attack. Then he asks Lancelot if he wants him to heal his injuries. He casts a spell to heal the captain's wounds. Lancelot realizes it's sacred magic and thought he only used barrier magic. Blake says it's a healing barrier technique that uses purification and regeneration. A giant level 8 orc asks how he dares to stay calm in front of him, becoming extremely enraged and charging at our protagonist. But his attack is stopped by Blake's barrier and doesn't reach either of them. He asks Lancelot if there's a chance to win, and he says he has a high-level spell to annihilate the orc. However, he needs time to recover, and the orc must have his guard down to be hit. Our hero says he'll cover for him and keep using the barriers for defense. To keep the orc from noticing the high-level spell coming, Blake will fight. Lancelot is shocked and asks how he's going to fight with just defensive barrier techniques. Demonstrating in practice, our protagonist creates barriers around his hands and feet. With energy flowing through his body, he leaps forward with great force. He manages to fly using the barriers, even surprising the monster. Then he crashes into the giant creature with such force that it gets thrown far and falls to the ground despite its massive body, making the monster even more enraged. But the mage keeps using the barrier under his feet to jump high. Reaching the monster's height, he prepares a punch with barriers surrounding his fingers, delivering a powerful blow to the monster's face. The moment it gets stunned, Blake shouts for the captain to cast his spell. Lancelot obeys and prepares his high-level, powerful magic, firing an extremely powerful spell of flames and spectral energy. Instantly, it annihilates the level 8 orc. When the magical blast ends, the creature is on the ground, completely burned and wounded. Everyone celebrates the giant's defeat and had expected no less from the captain. Lancelot, exhausted, says they somehow managed it. Before he can fall unconscious, our hero grabs him by the arm and praises his magic, saying it was incredible, and the captain returns the compliment. However, everyone only acknowledges Captain Lancelot's effort and not Blake's. They say he would have won easily if Blake hadn't interfered and accuse him of stealing the glory. Lancelot tells them to stop with those comments because without him, he wouldn't have won. Even so, our hero says the captain could have won without him, actually. He explains that the captain is human. He's not perfect or invincible. No matter how strong he is, he's still mortal, and his comrades should fight alongside him. The royal mages ask if he's mocking the captain. The protagonist gets angry and says he knows what it's like to fight alone, and now knows the peace of having people by his side. He also acknowledges that no human is perfect, and the captain is human too. The royal mages get irritated and walk away offended. Soon after, the hostages were safely returned to the village. The village chief admitted he was being threatened and asked for their forgiveness. The identity of the giant red bird remains unknown, and many questions still linger. After that, they returned to the royal capital. The trio had been away from home for a long time and were exhausted. At that moment, someone calls out to our hero to talk. Lancelot invites him to the bar and apologizes for the sudden invitation. For the first time, someone invited Blake out to eat, and he's happy about it. The captain says it's the first time he's invited a friend to do something like that. They stop being formal and call each other by their real names. The two make a toast to being just two ordinary men. They toast again for being two imperfect people. After that, the two spend hours laughing and having fun at the bar like true friends. Back in the royal capital, our protagonist has a day off and walks the streets alone. A lot has happened recently, and he's unsure what will come next. Thanks to the heroine Alice, who has now entered his life, he knows he needs to thank her. And meanwhile, a hooded person runs after him, bumping into our hero and quickly apologizing afterward. Blake asks if she's hurt, and suddenly the girl grabs his hand, leading the mage somewhere he still doesn't know. The royal knights are searching for the girl who's on the run. They wonder where she went and start searching for her. The two hide, and she apologizes for dragging him like that. He realizes it's the heroine Alice who's fleeing from the persistent guards. The girl says she heard about his recent achievements and that it's been a long time since they last saw each other. Blake says he didn't do anything special and asks why Alice is being chased. Excited, the girl says she's running away from work. Preparations to celebrate the fall of the Demon King and other events she's forced to attend. She has to meet thousands of important people. In addition, she has to respond to letters and handle important bureaucratic documents. Our hero imagines that must be very difficult. Hedda and the others are going too, but they don't have nearly as much work as Alice, who's overwhelmed. That's why she ran away from her responsibilities and isn't thinking about the consequences. Blake understands that Alice needed a change of pace to calm down. He then asks if the heroine wants to go out with him to clear her mind. Since she's done so much for him, he wants to thank her properly. Without thinking twice, the girl accepts our hero's invitation. She didn't know a place like this existed so close to the royal capital, and it turns out to be Alice's favorite spot. Blake asks if he can intrude on the personal space Alice comes to when she wants to be alone, and she allows it. She then takes out several foods from her lunchbox for them to share. Our hero is impressed by the sandwiches she made. He asks why there are 2 sandwiches, but she doesn't explain. They quickly start eating, and our protagonist compliments the taste of the food she made. He says she's a great cook, and Alice says she's very domestic despite being a heroine. Our protagonist doesn't find that strange at all. Alice explains that before becoming a heroine, she was just a regular girl living in a simple village. Just an ordinary girl, good at housework, with no special powers. Until one day, she received a revelation and the blessing of the goddess Altria. From that day on, she became a heroine, one who received visions on how to defeat the Demon King. She underwent harsh training to become a warrior. She had never even held a sword before that and ended up with blisters on her hands. She admits it's amazing that she got strong so quickly and found swordsmanship fun. She figures it must be talent, and Blake agrees she got very strong in a short time. Alice says the training was tough, the enemies were very strong, and she had few companions. After trying very hard, the girl managed to find a way to defeat the Demon King. She says there are few monsters now, and the greatest threat is already gone. Now there is peace, and everyone can smile, but she's still a heroine. Blake says he's just an old mage who spent 30 years making barriers and knows nothing about the world. Alice asks why he's suddenly putting himself down like that. Even someone like him has beliefs in things only he can do. Our protagonist confesses that he wants to protect Alice. He kept placing barriers in the demon realm to protect everyone, and the same applies to her. Alice is a heroine and the strongest human in the world, and she asks if he still wants to protect her. Blake doesn't care if she's a heroine, he wants to protect Alice as a person. To him, Alice is a wonderful, caring, and hardworking girl. The girl doesn't even know how to react to so many compliments from the mage. She simply thanks him and confesses she's frustrated with everything. After she leaves, she thanks our protagonist for the wonderful day she had, then says they can go somewhere else together again. After she says goodbye, we see someone spying on our hero, Gunther, the former vice captain of the 5th Division, cursing and hoping the protagonist dies. A royal mage says Gunther will be transferred to the Mabel region. He becomes furious about being demoted and insults the man, who justifies it by saying Gunther abused his authority and acted with extreme misconduct, even causing trouble in the training unit. This royal mage says he's reached his limit and won't cover for him anymore. Even after all the benefits he gave this mage, he now feels betrayed by him. The man says forming a team with him was a mistake, and he never imagined he'd be so foolish, telling him to start over at the border of the next kingdom. The former vice captain becomes furious for being sent away, reacting negatively and aggressively, venting his rage with kicks. Everyone around him gives him dirty looks, and he feels deeply humiliated. The royal mages of the capital find it amusing what he did to himself and how disgracefully it ended. Completely enraged, Gunther unleashes a fire spell while cursing the mages. The next day, he's fired from his position by a higher-ranking mage. He tries to justify himself by saying he holds a high noble rank, but the man says he should be in prison and should be thankful he's only being dismissed. Saying he was once essential to the country, Gunther wonders why he's being treated this way. Falling to his knees on the street, people ignore him and slam the door in his face. He thinks that Alice, the heroine, might understand his worth. After all, he fell in love with her at first sight when they fought side by side and aimed for the position of captain. He thought she might notice his charm, until Blake showed up and the girl completely forgot about Gunther. That made him feel a lot of envy and jealousy, and he calls Blake the root of all evil. He keeps wondering where Alice is so he can talk to her, until he found the heroine on the street alongside the barrier mage. Before he could be happy to see them, he came face to face with his archenemy. Watching the two of them, he wondered why this was happening. After all, he believed he was the one who should be there going out with the warrior, and so his dream of marrying her and living a life by her side was shattered. That made him feel deep rage toward the barrier mage, wishing for his death. He concludes that he should annihilate Blake and take Alice for himself, saying that the heroine belonged to him from the very beginning. Inside the royal capital, all the recruits were standing in formation, with all the units assembled in one place and all the people gathered. They all showed up to celebrate the Demon King's subjugation ceremony. He was going to announce the assigned positions, starting with the main gate guard of the unit, then the one in charge of escorting Lady Alice and her team of heroes. The group hopes to be part of the escort team, and some time later he finishes announcing all the roles. The red-haired boy wonders why all the royal mages are staring at them, until Clara realizes that they are part of the team that will escort Alice and the heroes. Everyone is shocked to learn that they are part of this team. The royal mages don't like the idea of recruits doing the escorting. Lancelot quickly says it was a personal recommendation from Alice herself. They performed admirably during the monster attack. Blake has the achievement of defeating Lord Gunther and has the trust of Alice and Edda. Everyone agrees that he's truly strong enough to fight alongside the captain. The captain declares that this is the final decision and orders them to fulfill their respective duties, and the mages obey him. Surprised, the quartet arrives in front of the heroine's room. Even feels like he's going to throw up from so much nervousness. The girls find it unpleasant and tell him to hold it in, but they're all trembling from anxiety, and they have no choice but to enter the room. As soon as they enter, The heroine Alice and the witch Edda are already waiting for them. They are surprised to see the two of them so close. Our protagonist greets them as if he were already close to them. Alice says she heard about the great work Blake did defeating the monsters. The witch was already expecting that from him, and the quartet is impressed by how close and familiar they seem. They sit together with the royal knights and get very nervous, until the heroine says they're not going to hurt them and they can relax. Theris thinks the two are very friendly, but the knights are scary. The two say they recommended Blake because they know his ability very well. The thin girls accompanying Edda find it very reassuring to see him there. Clara is shocked that so many incredible people know the old man, which indicates he's no ordinary person. The redhead had already realized how amazing he was, but didn't expect it to be on this level. One of the knights makes a suggestion to the heroine and asks if the three accompanying Blake are also strong, saying that they don't give off the aura of strong people. They look like beginner mages no matter how many times you look at them. He suggests maybe they should be replaced by more experienced mages. The three young ones admit that maybe they aren't that useful, but regardless, Blake trusts them. Clara stands up and asks to be allowed to be part of the mission. The three say they can do this and that no one really knows what they're capable of. The royal knight asks if they can take a test with him, so the three stand in front of him in an arena. He says the rules are simple. If they land a single hit on him, they win. And the royal knight won't use magic, putting himself at a disadvantage. The three don't like the way he looks down on them. Annoyed, the redhead tells him not to make that face and prepares a fire spell. The three prepare their spells and attack the royal mage together. After all three are on the ground, he asks if it's already over. Even is shocked that he dodged all their magic. This royal knight claims to have been trained by Lady Walburga, and says he wouldn't lose to mages like them. Walburga was part of the vanguard of Heroes of the Holy Sword, a genius in the art of swordsmanship. She has a lot of experience fighting mages, and there's no chance of defeating her. The royal knight can't entrust the escort duty to powerless humans. He asks how many days are left until the ceremony, and Alice says there are 3 weeks. Blake asks if they would be accepted as part of the team if they got stronger on their own. The royal knight says he will evaluate them 3 days before the ceremony and decide then. Our hero asks what they should do, and the trio refuses to give up and wants to grow stronger. The 2 heroines say they're rooting for the team and wish him good luck. The knight wonders what they can possibly achieve in just 3 weeks, but says he will observe their performance. The trio plans to give their all in training to become stronger. They head to the Mecha Forest, facing giant high-level monsters. They scream and run from the level 3 monsters in fear, thinking they can't win, while the protagonist, floating on a barrier, tells them they can win. He says they won't grow stronger if they run from the fight. The red-haired one gathers his courage and casts his fire magic at the monsters, but the creature dodges and lands right in front of Even. The lizard man stops right in front of him. The team realizes their spells weren't very effective and doesn't know what to do. Blake says they need to figure out on their own how to survive and get stronger. The lizard man is about to ferociously attack the redhead, but before he can finish off Even, our protagonist steps in and creates a barrier. He says he'll protect them when things get too rough, but then he motivates the trio, telling them they can do this. Theris says they can get stronger if they're properly prepared. Clara says to remember the old man's words in order to be ready. However, Blake says he can't train their magic. He can only teach barrier techniques and knows the basics of physical training. They're unsure what direction to take, but our hero tells them to use the cards they already have up their sleeves. Remembering that conversation they had with the old man, they understand what to do now, which is to improve their physical skills through magic. So when the next attack from the lizard man comes, the girl easily dodges it. Then the redhead hits him with fire using his spell. For the first time, it seems to work, and the lizard gets a bit burned. Theris shows up, telling the creature not to get distracted, already casting her spell. It's completely effective and annihilates the level 3 monster. The trio is overjoyed by the victory and decides to stick to that formation. Our protagonist acknowledges that by fighting together, they multiply their strength. Especially if they get along, they'll grow even stronger together. On the 2nd day of training, the protagonist has them climb a mountain to improve their stamina and strength. On the 3rd day, they start to understand their own capabilities and use spells in new ways like healing. Several days pass, and they begin to greatly improve the quality of their spells. Then 3 days before the ceremony, the royal knight announces that the evaluation will be held again. Even is determined to act differently this time and not lose. As soon as the royal knight sees they're overly confident, he wonders if Blake encouraged them. But he sees no value in false confidence. After all, they're about to face harsh reality. The redhead thinks he should attack first to secure victory and casts his fire spell. However, the knight slashes through the spell with his scythe and says it was useless. But then Theris appears behind him, preparing her purple spell. Yet the knight also dodges that attack and says it's equally useless. He tries to strike the girl, who dodges, and he had thought that blow would land. He realizes that they've improved their physical abilities and skills during this time. He also notices they're fighting well as a team. The battle continues with the trio attacking and him cutting through their strikes. After a while, the trio begins to feel tired and sees that he really is very strong. They decide to bet everything on one final sequence of attacks. They charge the Royal Knight in a tactical formation they had already trained. The team plans to use their newly acquired magic in unison. Then all three launch massive intermediate level spells at the same time. The Royal Knight manages to slash through the enormous spells fired at him, but he ends up exhausted. Even feels frustrated that he dodged and avoided their strong combined attack. At that moment, Alice says the fight is over, and they feel drained of magic and sense that they've lost. Blake tells them they should be proud because they've gotten stronger in just 3 weeks. The knight walks up to them and says they passed the test, even though they lost. With a crack in his armor, he says it was an impressive spell. Kneeling before them, he says they've become noticeably stronger in 3 weeks. He says they'll do well in the escort mission, and the old man is proud of them. The trio is very happy to receive this in return for their hard work. Alice notices that they have a master-disciple type of relationship. She believes that with Blake's team, the ceremony will go smoothly. However, the witch knows there will still be some rumors and hopes everything goes without trouble. Meanwhile, we see the sickly Gunther walking the streets looking terrible. At last, the day of the Demon King's subjugation ceremony arrives. Everyone in the city celebrates and cheers as the hero team passes by in carriages. The trio of young ones is amazed by the size of the crowd and know they must escort the heroine properly. Blake notices that Alice's companions are in a dragon-drawn carriage behind them. Suddenly, the heroine arrives and wants to talk to our protagonist. However, he believes they must now focus on their job. At this moment, he feels they cannot afford to give any chance for failure. After all, in the words of the Royal Knight, the heroine and her companions are living targets. He comments that there have been many repeated attempts to kidnap or eliminate the heroes. That's why the group exists, to protect the lives of all of them. Blake knows they must be more vigilant than usual. Meanwhile, the former vice captain of the 5th Division watches everything from the crowd, burning with hatred for our protagonist and wanting to annihilate him, until he suddenly starts running toward the carriage carrying the heroes. Then everyone notices that the frenzied person is Gunther. All the royal soldiers rush toward him, showing no mercy if he tries to resist. He frantically repeats that Alice will be his and that he will eliminate Blake. The royal guards charge him, and he sets them on fire with his magic. The public is terrified by the flames of his spell, and everyone notices that he's a mage. The wise witch appears behind him and casts a water spell. She soothes the burns of the royal soldier. The group of young ones charges him and restrains the man with their bare hands. He starts getting furious, but he can't resist and collapses to the ground, cursing and ranting against Blake and the heroes, saying that if Alice won't be his, he'll burn everything with his magic. At that moment, he throws a torrent of flames in the direction of the heroine, but before it can hit her, our hero protects her with a barrier. This makes Gunther even angrier at the barrier mage. Our hero appears alongside the heroines, subduing the former vice captain. Alice asks why he's doing this, and Gunther says he wants her by his side. He says he loves the heroine just like the day they confessed their feelings. However, the girl says they barely ever talked, and that conversation never happened. As he's taken away by the guards, he insists that they talked a lot. Then he keeps shouting that he wants her love back. The witch knows he can't distinguish delusions from reality. Alice says she never dated anyone because she has no time for romance. At that moment, the 13-year-old witch speaks to the crowd and tells them the madman has been arrested and everything is fine now. All the citizens calm down thanks to the presence of the heroes. They continue their journey, happy to have good mages escorting them. They praise Blake for casting a barrier and saving Alice. They also say the trio is very skilled and that they were useful. Blake says people see them as dropouts, but they are excellent. They just haven't realized yet how much potential they have. As the young ones arrive at the castle, they're impressed by how luxurious it is, especially the redhead, who gets extremely excited by the wealth of the place. Blake says they were invited by the heroes, and there's a good reason to be happy. Clara points out they're drawing a lot of attention and should calm down a bit. Alice and the witch suddenly appear, asking if they're enjoying the ceremony. The two girls are extremely well dressed for the Demon King's subjugation ceremony. Everyone praises the two girls, including our protagonist, who says they look wonderful. Alice and Etta get embarrassed and thank the old man for the compliment. Lancelot appears and says that Blake has done very well so far. However, he says that his team has done much better than him. The team thinks he's just being modest, but even becomes full of himself. Blake also praises Clara's healing abilities, and she gets shy from the compliment. Alice asks when they became so close to Captain Lancelot, saying it's unexpected. Everyone continues chatting and having fun, as well as eating well and drinking. However, the high-status guests don't seem to like the team who are listening to the heroes. Blake even feels uncomfortable in the presence of the crowd. Then comes the question, where are the other heroes, Val and Rua Hermina? The witch says that Walburga is not participating in the ceremony. and Hermina is currently busy. Our protagonist only wanted to greet the heroes. Then music starts playing to begin the ball's dance. Because of that, Alice invites our protagonist to dance. Blake says he's never danced before, but ends up joining the heroine in a dance. She tells him to just follow her steps and everything will be fine. They dance gloriously and beautifully. The other girls feel a bit envious, while Even thinks it's all very amusing. Next, the barrier mage invites the wise witch to dance. She accepts right away, and they also dance cutely. Alice notices that Captain Lancelot is smiling. The captain is surprised by how his own behavior has changed after meeting the barrier mage. The heroine thinks he's a special person who's influencing everyone around him for the better. They also comment that Gunther was influenced in a bad way by him, though he's a despicable person. They ask what's going to happen to him, and the captain says he's being taken to the guillotine, saying that his obsession led him to that point and that it's not Alice's fault. A few days pass and the ceremony comes to an end. Our protagonist says that after the ceremony, he'll have to go on another expedition to a different continent. It's going to be tough. Alice says it's the fate of the hero party and they need to report the Demon King's defeat. It's also to demonstrate the power of the Kingdom of Hendria, although Edda would rather be researching barriers. The heroine says that if something happens in the royal capital, he should take care of it. Our protagonist says he'll do as she told him. Then the wise witch whispers in his ear, saying she wants to play with him next time he comes back. He promises to play with her, and then the two girls leave in the carriage. Blake wishes them a safe trip to the next continent. After their departure, the captain says it's the first time the hero party has left the capital since the Demon King's defeat, and he hopes nothing bad happens to them. Meanwhile, Gunther, the maniac, seems to be planning something sinister in prison. 1 week after the departure of the hero party, time passes without any strange incident occurring. But meanwhile, in prison, Gunther appears to be scheming something in his mind. Many weeks pass, and the young ones continue training magic, until the mages say training is over, and the trio is exhausted. Even says it was just another day of training and that he wants to go on missions. The girls view that as crazy and are even thankful there are no missions. But the redhead has grown so much stronger that he wants a truly exciting challenge. However, he notices a strange look from the old man and asks if he's angry. In reality, the old man felt that something is coming. The royal knights announce that a massive wave of miasma is approaching. Everyone present is shocked to hear that. Blake and Captain Lancelot, along with the other mages, fly off to check the situation. They notice a huge wave of miasma heading toward the city. The townspeople are terrified upon seeing the black smoke approaching and start to flee. A little girl falls to the ground, and her mother protects her, thinking they'll be consumed by the smoke. But our protagonist intervenes and creates a barrier around them. He then creates a barrier over the entire royal capital to purify the miasma, protecting everyone and making the smoke disappear from the royal capital, driving the miasma away, just as the captain had expected from Blake, saving everyone in the city. And the mage says he can maintain that barrier for a few months. However, he cannot use the magic circle in this case. The mages continue levitating above the city to assess the situation. They see several mad mages massacring people in the streets with their spells. Captain Lancelot wonders if a civil war is beginning, asking the mage to maintain the barrier and for each squad to defend their designated area. He wonders whether it's an invasion from another continent or just a rebellion. Meanwhile, the young ones are running to save people, who are being annihilated in the streets in broad daylight. However, Captain Lancelot manages to rescue some civilians, asking the squadrons to do the same. Thus begins a war between the mages of the royal capital and the criminal mages. They start evacuating the city and protecting civilians. The crazed mages charge at the royal capital mages to eliminate them, but Even's group and the two girls manage to dodge. However, the criminals don't stop attacking them and try to eliminate them at all costs, until Theris enhances the other two to make them stronger. Then Clara and Even charge at the criminal mages attacking them, hitting them with their spells and taking them down with relative ease, saying that compared to Blake's training, this is much easier. The girl really thought she would die during the old man's training. Now they are surrounded by several criminal mages and wonder how many of them are there. They have no choice but to fight and use their spells to defeat these mages. A child in the street is about to be set on fire by the lunatic mages, until Theris gives her all to save the child and stop the spell from reaching them. As soon as the fireball explodes, everyone is in shock, thinking the girl might have been hit. But the hero created a barrier around the two, saving them and preventing their death. Our protagonist begins creating barriers around all citizens who were about to be killed by the mages. The captain is surprised to see all the civilians protected by barriers. He realizes that this is all being maintained by Blake, the barrier mage, who created a barrier for every living person in the city. Clara keeps attacking the criminal mages non-stop. After defeating them, they head toward another girl who is holding a child in her arms. She repeats that the old man's barrier protected and saved her life. They thank the goddess for that and notice the old man isn't near them, and realize he must be casting that magic from somewhere far away. They also look around and notice barriers covering everyone in the city. They wonder how he can be protecting every person in the royal capital like that, but they already suspected it. Coming from the old man, they knew he was incredible. Lancelot notices that all the barriers protecting the people of the royal capital are Blake's. The mages complain that the rebel army has a very large number of people. The captain asks if there are any extra troops from the Mage Academy to help them, but it seems there aren't any. Lancelot knows that if he abandons the location, the citizens will be in danger, and it'll take too long to reach the castle. He orders his mages to leave the area along with the knight troops. After all, Blake is going to support them at this moment. The mages realize the captain trusts the barrier mage a lot, because normally he would return himself. Meanwhile, the captain casts his spells and is counting on Mage Blake. All the enemy mages begin attacking the royal knights all at once. The knights refuse to let those criminals enter the castle, but the maniacs are very strong and keep launching spells non-stop at them. Then they begin invading the castle. However, before they can enter, they run into one of Blake's barriers, and realize that the castle's entrance is protected by the barrier mage. After that, they are attacked by the royal knights with sword slashes, being eliminated without mercy, and they thank the barrier mage who is sustaining it all. Our protagonist notices other criminal mages casting spells in his direction. However, he easily blocks the spells coming his way, until a man with a stone hand comes up from behind and grabs his leg, catching him off guard. As soon as he falls to the ground, one of the barriers vanishes, and the man who did it notices he doesn't have a single scratch. Then he comes face to face with Gunther and realizes that this rebellion was started by him. The villain asks how he dares speak to a high-ranking and noble mage like him, declaring and shouting that he will annihilate our protagonist. Then he says he lost his composure and claims he is a noble knight. Blake asks if he's not supposed to be in prison, and the villain says he had supporters who got him out. However, he doesn't explain how it happened. After all, he intends to annihilate Blake and sees no need to explain anything. Our hero asks why he's doing this, and the villain says it's all because of the barrier mage, who's a worthless person. He says it's his fault he got fired and sent to prison beyond the border. And on top of that, he took his beloved Alice with him. All of this got in his way, so it's the barrier mage's fault. But the protagonist asks him if this isn't just karma. After all, if he had done the right things, he wouldn't be in such a pitiful situation. Besides, he says that Alice never saw him as a lover. That starts to seriously enrage the former royal vice captain. While our hero tells him to stop blaming others for ruining his own life, the man enters a frenzy and says he's going to burn our hero until nothing remains. It doesn't matter how strong he is, he's maintaining too many barriers at once and won't be able to handle Gunther. Besides, they're all experienced fighters. At last, the maniac will fulfill his revenge and eliminate the protagonist. Together with his rebel mages, they start launching spells with full force at the barrier mage. Gunther celebrates that he'll finally be able to annihilate the protagonist. They launch a group attack with his rebel mages, but our hero easily defends with one hand, creating a barrier. Immediately, the criminal orders them to cast more magic to break his barrier. Some of the mages go after him, and everyone starts attacking with spells all at once, creating a massive wave of powerful spells to annihilate Blake. He reinforces his defense with his other hand, preventing the spells from hitting him. But after holding out for a while, his barrier begins to crack, and he gets scared, because at that moment, the criminal mage launches several more spell barrages. Unable to create another barrier in time, our protagonist starts dodging. Also using his barrier techniques, he evades and blocks all the attacks, but the mages don't stop. They throw everything they have at our hero. He places a barrier on his leg and jumps high into the air to escape the blast. However, they don't stop for even a second and say there's nowhere he can run. Our hero creates a sphere with his barrier in his hands. He then uses those barriers to propel himself forward and fly away from the attacks. Landing on the ground, he manages to dodge all the spells. He knows he can't use all his power since he has a barrier surrounding the entire capital. According to Gunther, he's going to be eliminated because he insists on protecting worthless citizens. But Blake says it's thanks to all of them that he's able to fight, with their support. The criminal mage gets irritated by that nonsense and attacks him again with everything he has. But our hero dodges and prepares a counterattack. He charges straight at the rebel mages and strikes them with his barriers, taking down several of them at once with ease, leaving their leader afraid. Our protagonist explains that this is a mobile barrier. He says his barriers have both offensive and defensive variations, including a barrier technique that can heal people. His enemy goes insane and asks where he gets so much magical power from. After all, barrier techniques are supposed to be only for defense, and only a holy mage can heal. He says it's not right that he can do all this with barrier techniques, but our protagonist tries to explain that he trained hard to be able to do this. The villain gets angry and tries to attack him once more. But before he can act, our protagonist moves faster and takes down the remaining rebel mages, leaving the villain alone and afraid as Blake radiates immense power. With a threatening look, our hero says that Gunther is the last one standing, and he asks why he doesn't just surrender already. But the enemy has an ace up his sleeve and pulls out a purple crystal. He then places it in his mouth and swallows it. A huge amount of purple energy begins pouring uncontrollably from his body. Black veins appear all over him, and he says that now he's invincible. He had planned to use it when he was alone with Alice, But with this power, he can even bring down a hero. Our protagonist starts creating barriers and says he won't let that happen. The villain tells him to stop pretending to be a protector and prepares a massive spell. He hurls a whirlwind of evil purple magic, which our hero easily blocks with a barrier. However, it suddenly shatters, leaving him unprotected and in shock. A massive explosion happens afterward, with our protagonist caught in the middle of it. After telling the man to stop acting like a guardian and breaking his barrier, our protagonist avoided getting hit by using a mobile barrier to escape the blast center. However, the villain doesn't stop attacking. Even with Blake now floating over the city, our hero keeps dodging and none of the attacks hit him. Annoyed, his enemy asks if he won't even be able to lay a finger on him. He starts charging a spiral strike and says this will be the end of our hero. The villain unleashes this massive blow, and the protagonist creates another barrier to protect himself, which ends up shattered. He gets slightly injured, and the enemy says he's almost at death's door and that his barriers are useless. Then he says he's a freak and therefore deserves to be annihilated. At the moment he's about to unleash another strike to end the protagonist's life, someone appears behind him. Several spells hit him directly from behind. The trio that travels with our protagonist had attacked Gunther from behind. Clara starts asking about the rebels and says the mage corpse is struggling to deal with the miasma, so she tells our hero to fight with everything he's got to defeat the villain. His enemy grows more and more furious and says he'll wipe all of them out, leaving the barrier mage Blake with an expression no one had ever seen before. The barrier around the capital begins to dissipate, along with the barriers that were surrounding every citizen in the royal city. He starts focusing all his magic into a single point, releasing it in an explosive surge. The trio is amazed by the amount of magical power he possesses. Everyone begins praying for him to win this battle. Meanwhile, the protagonist is engulfed in a powerful flow of energy. Gunther says it's useless to act so serious now, because he won't be able to land a hit. The villain casts another extremely powerful spell at the barrier mage, saying that he's already lost and hasn't even realized it yet. However, the protagonist manages to avoid the spell without a single scratch, leaving the villain in shock as he was sure the attack had hit directly. But he doesn't care and says he'll do this as many times as needed to win the fight. Our hero doesn't even flinch as several magic spheres come flying at him. Even with the villain saying it's impossible to block them since they're high-level spells, Blake creates a magical barrier around his enemy, trapping him inside and then releasing a powerful electric surge. The shock is so intense that Gunther immediately collapses to the ground, completely unable to stand. The villain Gunther can't believe his own defeat. Then Blake says that barriers exist to protect everyone. His enemy can't even say a word and is annihilated once and for all. The miasma begins to vanish from the city the moment he is defeated. Everyone on the old man's team begins to celebrate and cheer for his heroic deed. Clara runs over to give the old man a hug, saying she's so happy about it. At that moment, Captain Lancelot appears, saying that Gunther had a cursed item that generated the miasma. It was a cursed tool that had been activated by his magical power. Our protagonist explains that someone was behind all of this, helping the villain. The monster attack in the village and the royal capital being attacked are abnormal events, which the captain doesn't consider coincidences, but rather orchestrated assaults. Either way, he's glad the crisis in the royal capital was avoided and thanks Blake. The two shake hands, and after that, weeks go by. Afterward, the king of the continent crowns him as the official barrier mage of the court for his contributions during the capital's attack. None of the people expected the king to create a new title just for him, but they accept it. Meanwhile, everyone who likes Blake applauds and is overjoyed. Our hero never expected to receive an official position. Next, he is taken to his debut as the barrier mage. There's a huge crowd of people who came just to see the hero who saved the royal capital. Our protagonist waves to the crowd of people whose lives he saved. After the ceremony, he sits exhausted in the castle hall. He never expected to become a court mage and thanks all his friends who supported him. Feeling much more confident, he realizes that his barriers were never useless. But he doesn't know what to do now, since barrier techniques have always been treated as worthless. He wishes to spread the word around the world that barriers are incredibly useful to protect people. His goal is to train barrier mages and teach them his techniques, and so more and more people across the world can be protected by barriers. This is the story of a 30-year-old barrier mage who managed to change the world. However, a curse begins to appear on Alice, and she starts desperately calling out for help from Blake, a cursed hero.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.